All right. Hello, everyone. This is Ken Jones from Scientia Mobile, and welcome to the Mobile Overview Report for the fourth quarter of 2018. That would be October through December 2018. Today, our hosts are myself, Ken Jones. I am the Vice President of Marketing for Scientia Mobile. I have about 15 years experience in telecommunications and internet-related companies. And on the line with me, I have Yonan Seteres. You want to take a shot at
Yeah.
correcting me on pronunciation
No,
today?
yeah. Well, now correcting you is almost unnecessary. You're improving
Excellent.
every time we have this webinar. So, but the correct pronunciation would be Jon Arne Sæterås. It's a Norwegian name. So I am joining out of Norway, where I'm located. I am the vice president of products and innovation in Centric Mobile. I have experience both from the telco industry and also content delivery and also software development related to mobile and also messaging and things.
Yes. Great. So today, our agenda is we'll spend a little bit of time just introducing who we are, what device intelligence is. Then we'll get into the meat of the report. The mobile overview report will cover the Apple iPhone launches. We'll give you a quick update on the standings of various iPhones. We'll also look at video orientation on smartphones and tablets. How are people holding their phones when they're looking at videos? Next, we'll look at near-field communication support. In the past, we've reported on near-field communications, and we've updated that report in this latest mobile overview report. We'll look at connected and smart TV browsing. There's a new growth in the programmatic advertising that is going on for connected and smart TVs. And we are able to identify a lot of those devices, which is very important. The geographic spotlight that we're looking at this time around is the Egypt region. And we have a full breakdown of some of the statistics around mobile usage in Egypt. And then finally, we'll look at some of what we call our standard mover reports. So top phones, top tablets, and we'll leave time for questions. So if people have questions, feel free to type them into the interface for the webinar, and we will get to them. So just a quick introduction. Scientia Mobile, we are the leader in mobile device detection and intelligence systems, and also in image optimization. What is device detection? Well, a lot of problems occur on the mobile web these days. Typically, there's issues around poor mobile user experiences. Images are loading too slowly, and there's really not metrics that can get you down to the device level and analyze where these problems are occurring and troubleshooting and how to fix them. So what we do is we provide mobile device detection and image optimization solutions that help you optimize and target your user experience and or advertisements. Advertising companies are one of the biggest users of device detection these days. We've also built on our image engine solution, which provides a content delivery network that is device aware and will take master images, then resize them, compress them, right size them for each individual device model. And it ends up accelerating page loads and improving the user experience dramatically. And then finally, device analytics. People can measure the impact at a device level. All of these problems cost millions of dollars, especially to advertising and e-commerce players, and using device detection can help to solve that. Getting into some of the reports here, an iPhone update. Let's take a quick look. It's been several months since about 6 months since the uh, release of the iPhone group for 2018. So the iPhone XR, the XS, and the XS Max. And by the end of 2018, the iPhone XS Max was the most popular of those three, um, with 0.99% of all smartphone usage, which doesn't actually seem like a lot at this point. There's a lot of fragmentation because there's so many new models of iPhones, uh, and there's also a lot of competition from Samsung and hundreds of other competitors. The most popular iPhone at the end of 2018 was the iPhone 7 with 4.69% of smartphone usage. Now, we start to see a decline in the iPhone 7. It's a dip below 5%, ending at 4.69. And that corresponds with the uptick of some of the newer models. But we see a fair number of what I'll call the recent models, the iPhone 7, the iPhone 8, and the X's out here. But it's a growing trend, but not a huge blockbuster for Apple the way we've seen in the past, and I think we've also seen some financial reports to that regard. In the last quarter for Apple, that sales have been disappointed primarily in China. Um, but it takes a while to capture the market share. I anticipate that these three phones will continue to trend upwards. The question really becomes, how does Apple as a whole uh, retain market share versus Android competitors? And to date, we've seen that it's relatively steady. Apple is holding their own, but we will continue to monitor this.
Since we started this movie report, we in the beginning we were used to, once Apple launched a new device, it was almost as quickly adopted as the new iOS versions of the operating systems, right?
That's
But
true.
now we see a clearly more diverse landscape here, where people keep their phones for longer, maybe, and they skip a version or two.
Hmm.
Even in the Apple space now, we're starting to see diversity, quite a lot of diversity, and that means that the devices are dramatically different from each other. It's not an iPhone is not an iPhone anymore. The chipset is very different. The capabilities of the chips are very very different, also in terms of size and the quality of the screen and things. So now is a good time to mention that of course Whirlpool and our device detection solution can help our customers identify which iPhone we're talking about here too. So it's fairly easy to integrate into Google Analytics with Whirlpool.js, which would enable you reporting based on the make and model of the iPhone, which is of course very useful.
Right. Excellent. Okay. Moving on to another topic, video orientation on smartphones and tablets. So in the past, in the mobile overview report, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, we reported on orientation of a smartphone or a tablet. Was it held primarily in portrait or landscape? And we found that smartphones were primarily held in portrait, and the tablets, it was about a 50-50 shot, whether you're holding it in landscape or portrait. Um, and we had some questions arise on Twitter from various, mostly journalists actually, questioning, well, what about video? Are people watching videos in portrait or landscape? I mean, it makes sense if videos are filmed in landscape that people would flip their phones to the landscape mode to get the optimum experience, expand the screen, and watch the video in landscape. Um, but we decided, well, let's test this. What we did is we looked at 3.9 million web page visits in this study. About 25% of those originated from video-centric websites. Um, and we really wanted to isolate the impact of video here. We didn't, so we set a criteria for what is a video-centric site. What we said is like more than 90% of the content on the page needed to be videos. And so, for example, if you went to the New York Times or any news site, there's typically a lot of text and there are images, but sometimes there are videos interspersed in there. Those do not qualify in our study as video centric. We said it has to be 90%. Not surprisingly, it we ended up with a lot of adult-oriented video sites, but there were about 25% that were just viral videos that are traded around, and those became the basis for our study here. And it actually provided, over 1 million web page views to analyze. What we found was that 82% of the time when videos are there, that people are holding it in portrait orientation, and landscape only 17.5% of the time. Now this is, sorry, going the wrong way. Excuse me. This is a little bit surprising. If you look at all websites, 91% of the time, people will be holding it in portrait, and 82% of the time on video sites. So, the question becomes, why why are people doing this? It's not necessarily the best experience on a smartphone. And we've come up with we don't know the exact answer, and this is actually really confusing when we have other sources. If you read our blog, there's a company called I believe it's Wibbits that did a survey of millennials primarily, and they said that their preferred format was the landscape video. People can film video in various modes. They can do the vertical mode or the landscape. Most of the time you see things in landscape, and people tend to prefer that. One video format that I hadn't really considered before this study was that people can do it in square. You can actually kind of crop the image and get it in square, and this kind of splits the difference and actually might be an interesting way to approach video. But one of the things that we were trying to figure out is why would people leave things in portrait orientation when watching a video? But there are a couple of hypotheses here that it could be that their phone is actually locked in portrait mode. Several people find it annoying when your screen starts flipping around on you, and several manufacturers actually ship their smartphones locked in portrait. And learning how to unlock that orientation might be a technical hurdle for a number of users. Another hypothesis is that the increasing size of the smartphone screen makes the video acceptably large for most people to view things in portrait. An iPhone XS Max, nice huge screen, and perhaps the image is of a high enough quality that people don't feel the need to flip it. Another hypothesis is that much of the content on the internet is maybe not so compelling that it needs that expansive landscape experience. Are people, a lot of people that I've talked to are actually listening to music, or seeing a talking head do some sort of reporting, or provide some sort of report. And it doesn't really require a full immersion in the visual elements there. And another um, barrier to flipping to landscape might be that a lot of times when you flip to landscape, it's a little awkward, and it becomes a two-handed stance, and that sort of ergonomics maybe is not very uh, use, or that sort of position is not comfortable to a lot of people, and they're just saying, "Hey, I'll just keep it in portrait mode." And finally, a lot of streaming services look or provide the ability. YouTube, for example, allows you to bounce things to a larger device. So we wouldn't necessarily track that in this study. But anyway, that's a quick list of some of the reasons why people might be keeping things in portrait orientation. But when people do flip to landscape, the question is, are they actually flipping? Um, there is the idea that if you are going to a video site, that you might already anticipate this and start in portrait mode, and be ready. We found that actually 78% of the time people started in and stayed in landscape mode. So people are aware where they are. They don't necessarily have to flip. 22% of the time people were flipping. So we were actually able, the way our test worked, we did a initial evaluation, and if there was a change, we would record when that change occurred and mark it. And our report here is, what is that final state? Is it portrait or landscape? So people, 78% of the time actually were already in landscape mode. When they did flip the orientation, 22% of the time, it took about 28 seconds was the median time. So it takes a while for people to say, oh, okay, I should change my orientation and get a better experience here. And finally, the size does matter. The larger the screen gets, the more likely you are to have it in landscape mode. Looking here, a smartphone usually goes up to around the 6.5 to 7. Once you get to 7, you're starting to look at the mini tablet readers that are there. And as you get up to the 11-inch tablet, 71% of the time, you're holding things in landscape mode. So it's an interesting study in ergonomics and usage here that we're providing specifically about video. The next section of our report is on near-field communications, or NFC. Several years ago, we did a report on near-field communications, and we wanted to revisit that and see how things had changed. So looking at 2015, near-field communication, I wouldn't say it was new, but it was still growing in support. 54% of handsets or smartphones out there actually supported near-field communication. And by 2018, that has increased to 73%. The biggest change here is the growth driven by Apple starting to adopt near-field communications in their iPhones. I think it was starting with the iPhone 6 that they started to add this. So in 2015, the only the iPhone 6 was supporting it, and so this 36% here is indicating that there were previous models that were still in use that did not support it. Android, interestingly, is held pretty steady. When you look at things by operating system, there hasn't been a huge increase in the percent of phones, of Android phones, that are supporting near field communication. I wouldn't necessarily near field communication is looking more like a premium feature on higher end phones. Thus, you see, 96% of all iPhones in use have some sort of near field communications, whereas Android tends to have a wider range of price points, and we'll look at that a little bit further.
Might be worth noting that NFC support for on Apple iPhone 6 was only for making payments, Apple Pay functionality. It's only in the later, newer devices that Apple has opened up for regular NFC, NFC that you can use for pretty much anything.
Right. Yeah. There are different levels of NFC that we haven't really broken out in this report. Looking at things on a geographic basis at a continent level, the continents with the highest iPhone penetration show the highest near field communication support these days. So North America, Oceania, down with Australia, those are all big iPhone markets in terms of the percentage of the populations that are using it. So, well above 80%, 84% in North America, 87% in Oceania. But even in continents like South America and Africa, we've seen a growth in near field communications. There in South America, we see 52%. So everybody is beyond the 50% mark at this stage. On a manufacturer basis, this is looking at not necessarily what percentage of the models that are having, but the percent of traffic that is generated by phones by Samsung, let's say. So 73% of the traffic, Samsung related traffic, in 2015 had near field communication support. 74%. So it holds approximately steady. Apple, you can see once again that we've gone from around 36% up to 95%. And not too big of a change in most of the operators. Motorola has added this, so 50% of their devices are now supporting NFC, or 50% of the usage of their devices show NFC. So what are the most popular devices back in 2015 versus 2018 that had near field communications? So the iPhone 6 back in 2015 was the most popular device that had near field communications. Today it's the iPhone 7. And most of the iPhones today are showing up on this list. In fact, you have to get down to the Samsung Galaxy S8 before you see a non-Apple device. But Samsung S8 has 2%, and their previous model, the S7, has 1.9% of smartphone usage. And looking at the MSRP, so MSRP stands for the manufacturer's suggested retail price. This allows you to kind of break things into various quintiles. What we did, or deciles, what we did is, so every $100 of price, we made a breakpoint and evaluated what percent of phones have near field communications there. And what we've seen is that in general, near field communications has kind of shifted. In 2015, it was mostly in in kind of the mid tier, but with the iPhones increasing in price and their adoption, a lot of the more expensive phones, over 56% of all near-field communications usage that we see come from devices that are over $800 these days. So there's kind of been a shift in traffic toward the higher price premium phones when you're looking at near-field communications support. And actually looking within each, what percent of usage within each price category. So everything that is $1,000 or more has near-field communications these days. In fact, anything $900 or more has near-field communications, and it's a very high percentage. You see the feature in almost all the phones until around the $400 to $500 mark, and then it starts to drop off. And not surprisingly, the cheaper the phone, this is one of those features that they might take out in order to lower the price of the phone. Okay, so that's near-field communications. Now we're going to move on to smart TVs and connected TV browsing. So there's a growth these days in connected or streaming TV that people are doing. In fact, it's very common. Almost more than 2/3 of people in the United States, at least, are using some sort of over-the-top streaming service or connected TV. This can be either technology where there's an app built into a smart TV that allows you to stream movies or programming from various sources, or it can be an external box. We'll call them streaming boxes here that you plug in via either a USB or HDMI port to your larger TV. But looking at this report from eMarketer, there's a growing trend in the United States of users, and programmatic advertising is starting to get in here. So once you can look at an individual user and profile them and their device, it becomes a good vehicle for targeting advertisements. So ad insertion companies and systems are starting to work with your national broadcasters and your cable networks who are streaming their content to the viewers. And a lot of those advertisements go through supply side platforms and real-time bidding exchanges so that advertisers can work with demand side platforms to push targeted advertisements into the system. And our Wurfel device detection is a useful tool to help drive that targeting process. So let's look a little bit at some of the more popular connected TV devices. At a high level, there's what I'll call 3 different categories that might be being used for browsing. We only see the browsing that's going on. Clearly, there are apps that are custom made for Netflix or Amazon or Hulu. But here we're looking at the streaming that might be going on. And smart TVs account for 65% of that traffic. Streaming boxes, so external boxes like Roku or Amazon Fire Sticks, account for about 19%. And game consoles are also in the mix with 17%. So Samsung, with their smart TVs, is one of the largest TV manufacturers, and they have apps and built into their smart TVs. Sony is here primarily because they make the popular game consoles, and likewise Microsoft has the Xbox One that provides a lot of that streaming traffic. But as you get further down the list, there's a long tail here of what I'll call streaming boxes. And these are uh, plug-in devices that allow you to stream and in some cases browse the internet. So not necessarily a household names, but Amazon is one of them that makes the Fire Stick. A lot of smaller manufacturers that people are starting to use for to load up apps and plug into their TVs for connected TV. Uh, Looking at individual devices, the Sony PlayStation is one of the bigger game consoles. That and the Microsoft Xbox One are pretty popular. Then you get a whole string of Samsung smart TVs, the Tizen TVs from various years, and then a number of third-party streaming boxes. The Amazon Fire Stick Gen 2 is one of the things that we can identify. We identified in use over 150 devices right now, but none of those streaming boxes actually none of these devices totaled more than 10%. So it's a very fragmented market right now. It'll be interesting to see how this device market evolves. Shifting to our geographic spotlight, looking at Egypt this quarter, 2018 Q4. Egypt tends to be more of a mobile-centric economy than the United States. We have the United States here primarily for just comparative purposes. So 40% of all mobile device or all device usage is through a smartphone, whereas in the United States it's only 40%. Interesting differences. Tablet usage is about half of what it is in the United States. Egyptian tablet usage is about 3% versus 6% in the United States. Feature phones still have a relatively large percentage of the traffic, 1.7% for Egyptian use. The most popular smartphones, this looks for Egypt, it looks very different than what you see for the United States. So we have a number of the most popular device smartphone is the Huawei Y7 Prime with 2.7%, followed by the Samsung Galaxy Grand Prime Plus with 2.6%. Then you start to see the iPhone 6, so older model, still showing up probably via a secondary market resell into the Egyptian market with 2.5%. But you can see that in the United States there's a number of blockbuster phones that contribute more than 5%. So that a lot of them are iPhones. And in Egypt, it's a much more fragmented market. The top 15 devices that we list here account for only 24% of usage in Egypt. And, that's relatively unusual compared to an economy like the United States, where about 60% of usage is held by the top 15 devices. In terms of manufacturers, Samsung is the most popular manufacturer, followed by Huawei, and then in third place is Apple. This is very different than the United States, where Apple has about 58% of mobile usage and almost no Huawei phones. On the tablet side, the iPad Air 2 is the most popular tablet in Egypt, but it's about half of what you would see in the US, which is 15%. There are a number of other manufacturers like Lenovo, Samsung, that show up here. In the United States, Huawei actually has their tablet also. In the United States, the top tablets are almost exclusively iPads, Apple iPads. And in terms of smartphone usage, Egypt is 83% a Android market and only 16% for the Apple iOS operating system. And in terms of the version that they're on, Egypt tends to drag a little bit behind. For example, in the United States, 38, almost 39% of users are on Android 8, whereas the most popular operating system for Android is the version 6 with 21%. On the iOS side, it's about the same issue that Egypt falls a little bit behind, but not nearly as much. For example, both the United States and Egypt, the most popular version is this iOS version 12. And there's a little bit more lagging behind, but it's not nearly as noticeable as the Android versions. So moving on to what I'll call our standard reports. We have the Q3 for 2018 versus Q4 comparisons. As we noted before, the Apple iPhone is the most popular device in the world right now, the iPhone 7, I should say. And you can see that it's, a dark green here in many of the continents. Interestingly, the iPhone X is doing particularly well in Asia. It's actually more popular than the iPhone 7. But there is a drop-off that we're starting to see in the iPhone 7. So people are going through the upgrade cycle. We're seeing the iPhone 7 is starting to drop away in most of North America, Oceania, to a lesser extent in Europe, and a growth in North America of the iPhone X. We're also seeing growth in the Apple iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 8. Top tablets, the Apple iPad Air 2 is continuing to be one of the most popular tablets out there. And there's a number of smaller ones here that are on the list, primarily because of their appearance in Asia and some other developing markets. And looking at the iPhone or the iOS operating system, we saw a transition from the version 12 to the 12.1 that occurred pretty quickly in the last 3 months. You can see that by the end of 2018, the most popular version with 69.73% was the iOS 12.1. In general, Apple continues to do an excellent job in upgrading their users to the latest iOS version. Over 90% of users are on version 11 or higher at this point. That's not the case with Android. As you can see, it's you don't see the sweeping changes. It's more of a gradual change. The most popular OS version for Android is the version Android 8 with 27.35%. So that's the extent of our report right now. Hold on just a second. If you guys have questions, go ahead and enter them in the question module. And while you guys are typing those in, I'll talk a little bit. The way that we collect a lot of this information is um, by using our mobile device detection solution. And there's a free version that you can get, Wurfel.js, that is very useful for collecting a basic amount of device information, and it integrates well with Google Analytics. It's an easy to use JavaScript snippet that you can put into your website and feed the information into Google Analytics. If you're looking for more information and detail about a particular device, you can use our Wurfel.js business edition that has 20 of our most popular device capabilities, and that can provide you even greater flexibility. Another thing that you should know is that if you like this report, it's now possible to get customized mobile data reports from Scientia Mobile. We are providing a service for people who want to customize reports for certain geographies, whether you want to select global continents or over 40 different countries in both the developed and emerging markets. As I mentioned, we have a number of device capabilities. If you want to zero in on certain operating systems, browsers, apps, understand display resolution trends, chipsets, video codecs, and even economic issues like the price of a device or the release date of a device to get a sense of the life cycle of devices. We can provide that. We can also work with you on any sort of time frame that you're looking at for analysis of trends or making comparisons. And finally, we can work with you on the delivery frequency. If you need daily information feeds, we can provide that for any of your consulting or financial analysis needs. Okay, so I think that is everything. I'm not seeing any questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact us at Scientia Mobile. We're very interested in finding out what's the pressing issues for you, and it's quite possible that we can do an analysis report. A good example was that video orientation element that we went over today. Came from a online suggestion. Jon Arne, thank you for joining me. And
thank you for having me.
Yes. And I will talk to you soon. And the actual mover report will be available for download in around 2:00 Eastern time. So everybody who has subscribed to the mover report, we will mail you notification of this, and you can download from our site. So take care. We will see you next quarter. Thank you.